Huzzah! Woo-hoo! It is the end of April, and we are entering graduation season. Sons and daughters, grandchildren, nieces and nephews are graduating high school and college and moving off to greater things. So on today's Retirement Answer Man show, we are going to examine some gifts that you can give that might help them manage one of the most important things they're going to have to manage in life, and that is their personal finances, how they save, how they spend, and help get them off on the right foot. So that's what we're going to do on today's show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. In addition, we are finishing up our month-long series on managing IRAs, 401ks, and Roths in retirement. We're going to do that with some listener questions, as well as some last-minute tips to help you walk this journey in maximizing all those benefits you've saved so hard for. Now, next week, we start a month-long series, and this is the first repeat series I think I've done. A month-long series on how technology is going to help transform your retirement, to let you know what's coming and what might be there that can help improve the quality of your life so you can rock retirement. Sound good? Well, we can't do any of this, though, until we have that all-important disclaimer. Real quickly here, don't take advice from me. This is helpful hints and education. Before you do anything, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor, because that's just common sense. Now let's go talk about graduation. So we're about to enter the month of May and celebrate people in our lives that are graduating onto a new phase of life. It could be into college. It could be into the real world. And I remember when I graduated high school and graduated college, my 20s worked out fairly well from a financial standpoint, from an income standpoint, but worked out very poorly from a savings standpoint and a use of debt standpoint. And it's because I really grew up so much latchkey, and my mom passed away right as I graduated college, and I didn't have mentors in my life or exposure to some good lessons to help me get off on the right foot. So I just sort of figured it out myself and spent a lot of my 30s cleaning up my 20s. I don't want that to happen to my son, who is 23. I don't want it to happen to my daughter. And I don't want it to happen to the people that you love as well. So what I thought we'd do is I'm going to bring on a guest, Peter Lazaroff, who is the author of Making Money Simple, which just came out from Wiley. And we'll have links to it in our show notes, which I think is a great book for a graduate, even high school graduate, on helping expose some really important money habits early on. And Peter and I also talk about a lot of other books that can be great gifts. Maybe it could be a little library of books that might help them avoid maybe some of the mistakes I made, but some of the mistakes you might have made too. So let's talk with Peter. So last week, a gown came in the mail for my son. Now, that's a graduation gown. And he's graduating from Texas Tech. And so we have graduation coming up. So I thought I'd bring on Peter Lazaroff from PlanCorp. He's the chief investment officer who has a new book that I'm going to give to my son to hopefully help him create a firm foundation for building wealth. Hey, Peter, how you doing?
I'm great, Roger. How are you?
Good. Now, the book is called Making Money Simple. I've read that two ways. Making the subject of money simple, or making money is simple. Which one is it?
So originally it was supposed to be making the subject of money simple. And the title, I had a list of maybe 20 titles. I've never written the title of any blog article I've ever written, any article for Wall Street Journal or Forbes. Titles are not my strong suit, but I landed on this because I was hoping to make the subject of money simple. And then ultimately, as I thought about it, I thought, well, gosh, these systems and processes I'm describing isn't just making this subject simple, but actually the accumulation of wealth simple.
And it is much simpler than almost everybody makes it, isn't it?
Of course. And I think there's a huge vested interest in the media, in Wall Street, and even among a lot of financial advisors in trying to make it seem complicated, because in reality, it's a lot like mowing the lawn. I can mow my lawn, but if I hire somebody else to do it and they have a system and process, it ends up looking better. So generally speaking, I wanted to give everyone the blueprint that I used myself. It's nothing fancy. It was really just about being intentional about my savings. Give them the resources that I used myself, although with much better graphics. Mine were kind of lines on an Excel sheet. But giving people the tools that they need to turn career success into financial success. And my hope is that people like your son will find books like this very useful in setting them up on the right path, because when your finances are in order in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s, your options are so wide, both within your career and your personal life. And I think it goes overlooked. People look at wealth as just wealth, but it's the optionality that wealth creates.
That is key. That is key.
Oh my gosh.
Is being financially sound gives you options, right? Because if you have to stay at your career because you have to have the paycheck to fund all the debt payments that you have, or because you have no cash reserves or whatever, you're in jail.
Yeah. And you want to start a business? You might not. You want to, even something as simple as, do you want to get a dog? You're not sure if you can afford it. Do you want to start a family? Do you want to buy a house? Do you want to move closer to your parents so that they can be involved in your kids' lives? Little things. Do you want to take a big trip? Or if you're even changing jobs, could you afford to take 2 to 4 weeks off in between jobs to go explore the world? Well, not if you don't have your finances in order.
Well,
At least you.
Yeah, I remember when my wife and I were having our first child, who's 22 now. The kid that's going to get this book, right?
And I'm actually going to be at Texas Tech next week. So maybe he'll be among the students I'm talking to.
Probably not. He'll probably be at the bar. No, I'm just kidding. He's home now.
I'll join him. Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember when we were having kids, it came down to, because I did all this wrong, by the way, in my 20s. Totally did it wrong. And in my late 20s, we had our first son, our only son. And it came down to, could one spouse stay home with our newborn? And at the time, it was very problematic that could actually happen, because we had not done a lot of the foundational stuff that is in this book. And I think that is a position that we get ourselves in. We create a lifestyle unintentionally that traps us into the decisions 10 years later. The option set gets smaller as a result of that, right?
Absolutely. And I made mistakes myself.
Okay, I want to hear one of those, though. Don't just say that. Tell me a mistake you made in your early 20s.
I will. So let me say, I don't think I made a mistake in saving. I think I made really good decisions in saving. And the great thing about making good decisions in savings is that it covers up a lot of other mistakes that you make along the way. And most of my mistakes were portfolio related. I came out of college as an investment analyst doing individual stock research. I think a handful of errors were made between the 2007 and 2010-ish period, one of which was buying a leveraged ETF and not really knowing how that worked. And I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. I did it because I saw my mid-cap allocation was off by a certain percent. And if I used the leverage ETF, then I could get it to the perfect number, as if there is such a thing as a perfect portfolio. I used to think to the decimal place, this precise nature that people treat within their investments really mattered. Like this was the magical allocation. The mistake of buying an leveraged ETF 2 times S&P 400 midcap, that had its own set of mistakes too, because I didn't understand how the leverage worked. But I also feel like I bought individual stocks for too long a period. And that's a mistake I actually think everyone needs to make on their own in order to really believe it and to appreciate the behavioral lessons that come out of it. So those are the 2 things that stick out to me as big mistakes. The other one was I took advice from someone who I thought knew more than me. And it was my boss at the time. He was the chief investment officer at the firm I started out at. And he told me in the first week or 2, hey, I'm going to invest in stuff, but just because I'm doing it or our senior analyst is doing it, it doesn't mean you should do it. Don't just do what we do. Like I didn't listen to him. They were buying Countrywide Financial in 2007 as it was nosediving.
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah. And so I definitely dove headfirst into that as well and lost. Fortunately, I didn't have any money, but I lost a lot of what I did have. On the other end, I was maxing out my 401k, which was in all index funds and diversified. And so whatever nonsense I was doing in my taxable account and in my Roth IRAs, it was minimal compared to the big thing that I was leaving alone and letting rebalance on its own and not making really any decisions.
And this goes to the statement earlier about Wall Street and advisors and everybody making it much more complicated. I really think it's human nature.
Yes.
Right? Because action feels empowering, even if it's silly action.
Well,
right?
And it's how like we evolved as a species. You know, if you saw something that felt dangerous, you ran. If you heard a rustle in the bushes, you took off. You didn't sit there and calculate the probability that it was a tiger versus the wind. You just ran, because if you sat there and calculated the probability, then our species wouldn't have survived. And so, you know, our instincts are all backwards for investing.
That's where like neglect is a underappreciated trait after you get it set up correctly. Not that you neglect it forever, but you just ignorance or ignore it.
Yeah. I joke that if people looked at their portfolios once every 10 years, they would probably feel better, because when you look at market periods over long times, they're usually up more than they're down. If you look at it daily, you're giving yourself about a 50-50 chance about not feeling good. The longer you wait until looking, the better off you are. And generally, you know, we as a species, I think a lot of what my book is about, and there are things I think that, you know, your listeners would find relevant, but it really is geared towards people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. But you can't take the human nature out of humans. So instead of trying to change your human nature, build a system or a process that sort of tricks your human nature or works around it in order to get you to the right place.
So let me ask you this, because this book is geared towards, I'll call it millennials.
Sure. I say Gen X, Gen Y, but I'm a millennial. I'm one of the oldest millennials, so let's go there. Yeah.
Okay. These are all great lessons, and the book is great, and it's nothing that hasn't been written before, but it has your voice on it, which is great. But how do you get the horse to drink?
Yeah, it's a really good question. One of the most challenging you can have the knowledge of what to do. So I know that I should exercise regularly and eat healthy. And I eat, 2 or 3 bowls of cereal before I go to bed. That's not healthy. I know that there are things I should do, but how do you get them in place? And so the key is to find sustainable small habits. You can automate them, particularly their finances. When I talk about this book being the blueprint of how I feel like I achieved my financial success, automation was not as common 12 years ago as it is today. You could do it a little bit, but there are so many tools available to automate things so that you don't have to make the decision. Anytime there's a financial decision to be made, just broadly speaking, particularly with your investment portfolio, 99 times out of 100, you should do nothing and just stick with what you're doing. Through automation, you won't get 100 decisions. You make that one decision, make it really well thought out up front, and then you just go and let it go. And then you don't give yourself the chance to deviate.
I think that is key. I mean, my son, who works at Starbucks, he's been at Starbucks for 4 or 5 years, and he's 22, just graduated. And for about a year, I was being dad and harping on him, join their 401k, join their 401k. And it took him, I would say, a good 8 to 10 months to do it. And then he did 15%. And, at that time, that's painful.
Yeah.
That's food.
It's not like he's earning high wages.
That's gas money.
Yeah.
And he did it. And now it's really cool to see, because now he has about 6,000 or 7,000 accumulated in it. And he's like, wow, right? That's a perfect example. But it's that just doing it because you don't think you can do it. But once you get it automated, I think that's a great point, because otherwise 100%. We always have reasons not to.
Yeah, we're lazy, we're forgetful, you're busy. And when you're young, I think the 401k is such a good point, because when I speak on college campuses, I go through a lot of messages, but there's usually 2 or 3 slides where I'm like, all right, everybody, I see you taking notes. If you only took notes, this is the one. And I'll send the slide out afterwards, and just prioritizes what you need to do. And just saving up to the match, your corporate match, it's free money. No one's going to give you free money. Take the free money. I think we take for granted as advisors the power of compounding, and our brains are really not designed to picture exponential things. We think more linearly, like add 1 + 1 and it's 2, and add another 1 and it's 3. But with compounding, it's 1 and then it's 2 and then it's 4 and then it's 8 and it's 16. And it's really hard to picture. And so I tried to really emphasize that in the book. I try to emphasize that when we're working with the kids of clients, or when I'm on college campuses, or when I go into corporations to talk to employees as a part of financial wellness. If you can really respect that compounding, you'll be motivated to automate and get started.
Yeah, and the automation is key, because the dirty secret of compounding is it's like a hockey stick. Yep. It's flat and not very noticeable for a very long period of time. And then all of a sudden you have this curve where the numbers catch up and the compounding really takes impact.
Oh, yeah. And I tell people the earlier I can reach them in life, the more likely I can change their trajectory. And it's exactly because of that.
Yeah, I had a good friend who started a business, and I sent him a hockey stick, a small hockey stick to put in front of his desk so he could see it and remind himself that incremental effort compounds and it will hit all at once. Just like a business, really.
Sure. And just like I think a lot of skills, if you play piano, you make leaps. And as a writer, you have a book of your own and you make leaps in your skills as you keep practicing and practicing. And, it is a little bit incrementally better, but you can sometimes take a step back as well. And so again, when you emphasize it, and there's no real financial literacy courses, I am aware that there are more and more states requiring it for high school graduation, but
they had to be like the stock market game, though. That's like what they do in high school. I'm like, no, don't do that.
Well, and most academic research shows that it gives people overconfidence. So people who got high school financial literacy actually do worse with their future financial decisions in one part. And they speculate in one part because it's such a large gap between high school and when you need to make these big decisions. And the second one is that they become overconfident that, hey, I had a class in this, so I probably understand this stuff.
I got it.
Finance is so accessible these days. You can buy a stock you can open it up on your phone and buy a stock. You can move money. You can take a loan. You can get a mortgage from your phone now. Finance is incredibly accessible. And as a result, without having the right set of knowledge, it's really easy to make mistakes. And I think most of financial success comes down to two things. It's minimizing mistakes and staying the heck out of the way of compound interest. You find a way to do those two things and you'll be in great shape.
That's the quote right there. And it's interesting that technology is pushing more information and taking away all the friction to action, which it goes counter to what you just said.
Sure. Right? And it used to be we had pensions. And so people just didn't have to worry about it. But people are going to have to manage their retirement.
And it used to be, and I'm not this old, Peter. So I'm going to point this out. It used to be that if someone wanted a quote on a stock, intraday, they would call their advisor. Their advisor would write out a physical ticket. He would take it to the runner. The runner would take it to the desk. The desk would wire up to whomever, and they would wait, and they'd get a quote back, and the runner would put it on the ticket, run it back to the advisor. The advisor would call the client. Think of the speed of even knowing where IBM is on a particular day compared to now.
Well, it's really amazing. And think now, I joke with students often, now you can make a trade at the bar. You can be out with friends and they tell you something. And, if you could somehow slow down everybody to that extent, I think everyone would be better off. And generally speaking, you think an investment idea is great right this moment and you're a long-term investor, well, it should be great a month from now if you're a long-term investor. And
good points. So I want to end this with, we got graduation coming up, whether it's college or high school. Making Money Simple by Peter Lazaroff is on the list. Just quickly list off a few other books that you recommend to younger people that help them create this firm foundation.
Sure. So I actually had an article in the Wall Street Journal a week ago with the 5 books that I felt like were really influential to me building this system and then writing about it. One is The Richest Man in Babylon, which uses parables to tell just a litany of money lessons. For people who don't want something super technical and like reading stories, it's really digestible. So when someone gets a personal finance book, they're like, to learn about numbers. But there's so much storytelling that I think it's really accessible. If you know that someone is more into reading, I really like Christine Benz's 30-Minute Money Solutions. And I think that's good for all ages because you open the table of contents and every chapter's exercise you can do in 30 minutes to improve your finances going forward. And that's always been one of my favorite. And then this one's a little more investment wise and wasn't on this list the other day, but I really like The Elements of Investing, which was written by Burton Malkiel and Charlie Ellis. So Burton Malkiel had done A Random Walk Down Wall Street. Charlie Ellis had done Winning the Loser's Game. But they have a very short book that focuses a little more on saving than investing and, is very approachable, really quick to read. I think those are tremendous resources.
Great, man. Thank you, Peter. Making Money Simple.
Thanks, Roger, for having me today.
You bet, buddy. So before we get started with listener questions, one more clarification. Thank you, Al, on RMDs when it comes to 401k Roth plans. And this applies to the 403b version as well. Although a Roth does not have required minimum distributions, if you have a 401k or 403b Roth and you do not roll that to an IRA, it's a quirky thing, but they actually would require minimum distributions after you reach 70 and a half. There's a simple fix for that, and that is making sure that it goes from the 401k Roth version to a Roth IRA version. Thanks, Al. See how complicated this stuff can be? It's impossible to keep all this in your head. That's another reason why you need a good process. Let's get on to the practical planning segment. So in this practical planning segment, we are going to finish up this month-long series on managing IRAs, 401ks, and Roths in retirement by answering some listener questions and giving you some last-minute tips to help you manage taxes as you distribute from these accounts. So we're going to start off with a question from Joan. And rather than read the question, which is quite lengthy, let me summarize it. Joan wants to know, what do you do if you miss taking your required minimum distribution? The distribution that the IRS requires that you take at 70 and a half. What do you do if you missed and you didn't take the full amount? So let's look at this. Well, the requirement is that you take your required minimum distribution by December 31st of the year that you're taking the distribution for. This is after you reach 70 and a half. Now, if you miss taking it, Joan, there is a 50% penalty on the amount that you should have taken that you didn't take. Ouch, that hurts. So as an example, if you failed to take a $10,000 distribution, it was supposed to be 20, you took 10, you forgot to do the other 10. Well, the penalty that the IRS is going to hammer you with would be half of that, or $5,000. That's a big one. So you can see they're pretty serious about this. So we don't want to mess this up, but it happens. So what do? Number one is you want to consult with a CPA or a tax advisor. That makes sense because this is a lot of money on the line, and the best advice you can get, the better, right? But the basics is once you discover it, you want to take that distribution as soon as you figure this out. So as soon as you see, oops, I forgot to take that $10,000 out, and it's January 22nd, go ahead and take the distribution and do it as its own standalone distribution. That way you can maintain records that, okay, I took this distribution on this date. So you want to make sure you do that. That way you can save a copy of the check. Consult your tax advisor on this, but my understanding is you're going to prepare and file Form 5329 for the year in which there was a shortfall. And if the income tax for that year hadn't been filed yet, you can file it with it, or you can attach it and send it in separately. But let's say you missed like 3 years in a row, you're going to do a different one of these forms for each year that you missed. If you take this distribution in January and it was supposed to be last year, that is going to count as taxable income for the year that you actually take it in. If you took it in January, it's going to be income in that year, in addition to whatever required minimum distribution it is that you have to take. Now, you can go through a process of asking for forgiveness from the IRS, and Morningstar has a good article that talks about how to fill out the 5329 if you're asking for forgiveness. And it basically says, one is don't pay the penalty with the submission of the form. Send in the form, fill it out a certain way, and I'll have a link to it, to the article in the show notes. Send a copy of your check and send a reason that it occurred. And my understanding is what they're looking for is an extraordinary circumstance that caused it being missed and how it was remedied so it didn't happen again. So a good example is, hey, this is what my advisor or tax person told me to do. I started doing it. I got sick during the year. I was out of country and I didn't get a chance to go recheck it. And then as soon as I discovered it, I failed. Make the sob story. Make it real, but make it meaningful. What happened? Why you missed it? Some extraordinary illness, maybe a change in residency and you didn't get notices, something that was extraordinary, and then how you fixed it so it will never happen again. And the IRS can grant you an exemption of, okay, you get a redo on that one. And I have heard that it happens, so there is a heart. Joan, hopefully that gives you a framework for what to do if you're dealing with this situation. Ouch! So our next question comes from Mike, and he says, hey, I just retired at age 64 and I'm single. I got $1 million in a 401k IRA. Got $500,000 in brokerage, $500,000 in savings and TDs, a $40,000 a year pension. He works part-time, makes $15,000 a year, and he's delaying Social Security. How can I hide my money from RMDs and medical premiums? I'm going to get hammered. First off, Mike, well done. You've set yourself up very nicely. And it can be hard sometimes when you set yourself up nicely because the piper wants to be paid no matter what. And the more successful you are, the more taxes you end up paying. And that can be frustrating. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to a lot of the things that we talked about. And hopefully we highlighted some strategies. You know, you could delay Social Security. You could look at doing strategic Roth conversions to get some of that out of pre-tax money and fill up the tax brackets best you can. If you have a $40,000 pension and $15,000 part-time income, well, that's $55,000 before your deductions. So you do have some room to fill up the 12% tax bracket in doing Roth conversions. That can help. And even if you didn't want to do Roth conversion, you could still take it out and keep it as after tax. Those are going to be the easy things that you can do. And that can be something that you do and actually delay Social Security to age 70, even though a lot of times with a single person, that's not the best way to do it because you're not trying to plan for joint life, but it would help you from an income perspective in doing some of these conversions. So those are some ideas. But Mike, that's a great problem to have. Good for you, buddy. Our next question comes from Howard. Hey, Howard. And he says, are there any options for tax-free growth investments if you're just north of the Roth income eligibility? I was planning to max out my 403B next year, but I live in Minnesota, which loves to tax retirement income. I'm not convinced putting everything in a 403B is the best option. All right, Howard. So here are some ideas. Unfortunately, you don't have the option of a Roth 401k because that can get you around the income requirements. Definitely look at doing backdoor Roth IRAs. And, this works really well if you don't have outside IRAs. Essentially, what you do is you make a non-deductible contribution to an IRA, and then you immediately convert it to a Roth, which you're allowed to do, and there are no income limitations on that. It can get a little complicated if you have IRAs out there in the way that that's calculated, but that could be an option. If you have option to do a HSA, a health savings account, maybe it's even changing, depending on your medical conditions and the plan options, saving in a health savings account, which you save pre-tax, and then rather than using that money to pay medical expenses, you allow it to accumulate, and depending on your age, that could be for a long time, and you could even invest some of it as an aggressive strategy, and then as long as you take that money out for qualified medical expenses, it comes out tax-free. So it went in pre-tax, and then it comes out tax-free. And the one cool thing about that right now, the way the rules are written, let's say you did that. Let's say you contributed to your HSA, your health savings account, for 10 years. And if we assume you're married, so that would be $7,000 a year for family coverage using 2019. So that's $70,000 that you can save pre-tax. And now you have a $70,000 with any growth war chest for medical expenses pre-tax. But here's the catch. If you have medical expenses along the way and you decide not to tap your HSA, you can keep record of all those expenses. And the way the rules are written right now is you can submit an expense that happened 8 years ago for reimbursement. So if you're 50 and you retire at 60, you keep track of all your expenses from age 50 to 60, and you have $70,000 there where you can submit some of those expenses and take that money out tax-free. So that might be something you can look at as well. And lastly, and I've actually dealt with this in Minnesota before, is you can consider moving to a different state in retirement. Now, that may be drastic, but it can make a huge difference, especially if you have a lot of pre-tax dollars. I remember doing the calculations. I've done it more than once of someone in Minnesota moving to Florida, and it drastically improved their plan and gave them more options to negotiate with because the tax burden was so much lower. Now, I love Minnesota. It's beautiful, at least in the summertime for me, but that is an option and something that states are noticing and actually playing with in terms of how they decide tax policy in order to attract retirees, because all these baby boomers, you guys have so much money and you like to do so much stuff. So that could be another option. So hopefully that helps you, Howard. And our last question comes from Dan. And he says, hello, I am working my way through your podcast, your past podcast, crazy, being somewhat selective. Great job, by the way. Thank you, Dan. And he had a couple questions. He wanted to know, when does it make sense to roll over a traditional IRA into a Roth and pay taxes while still working? Well, a lot of that's going to be the tax bucket planning that we've talked about. So I think that answers that. When does it make sense to live off a taxable IRA and delay Social Security until age 70? You know, the hard part with tactical questions like these, Dan, are that ultimately it depends. And that sounds like a cop-out, but it's usually these tactical questions we have. And in order to answer a tactical question, you really have to follow a process that gathers all the information you need and go through the process to get an overall strategy that will lead to the tactical decisions. That's the only way I know of finding the answer that fits your particular fact set, because there are so many different things that interplay together. So it really does depend, especially the Social Security, because are we trying to maximize the survivor benefit? What is the health of the person claiming, and what's the health of their spouse? What other taxable income is involved? All of these things play into that, Dan. And these actually can be really dangerous questions to ask, because there's plenty of people that will answer them either trying to look smart or answering it from their mindset, not really understanding all the facts. The attorneys are really good at knowing this and being careful on how they say that. In other disciplines, well, maybe doctors too, they're very, it all depends on a variety of factors. So I would be very careful with those tactical questions, but all of those are going to work into play. And then his last part of this question, it says, presume that our taxable IRA distributions help to raise the 35-year calculations for Social Security. How do we calculate a point of diminishing returns? And he said, thanks in advance. Well, you're welcome. Actually, Dan, I don't think that gets counted into the 35-year wage calculation. I could be incorrect on that, but I don't think I am. So I'll have to look that one up, but I don't think that is something that we want to factor in. Feel free to email me or someone tell me if I'm wrong on that, but I don't think that works in there. So to end this series, what I want to do is go through some basic tips on retirement tax tips, which is sort of what we're talking about when we're trying to manage all these monies in all these different kinds of accounts. So number one is start as early as you can diversifying your balance sheet between taxable, tax-free, and tax-deferred. Two is really dial in and manage what it costs to live, because the less money you need to rock retirement, the more you can control how much you have to draw in the first place. Doesn't mean you don't do a lot of big discretionary payments, but you can at least manage those. But if you have a monthly obligation that's fairly high, then you're not going to have a lot of flexibility. Three, if it's possible and you have a pension, consider delaying taking the pension. I've had instances where the pension will continue to accrue, and we purposely delayed taking the pension so we could do Roth conversions for a period of years and then turn it back on. It's not always there. 4, and this is one that we don't think about. If you retire prior to 59 and a half, consider taking distributions from tax-deferred accounts, whether that's to do a Roth conversion or within some blended withdrawal strategy. If you leave work after you're 55, you can take money out of 401ks with no penalty. If you have IRAs, you can do a 72-2. You can take equal payments for at least 5 years. These things you might not do because you don't think you need the money, but if you're retired, it doesn't matter if you're 56 or 60, you're controlling when you're realizing income, and it might help you do Roth conversions. So a lot of times we don't think of that. Move to lower tax states, Alaska, Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming, to name a few. And then also consider being charitable. At the end of the day, I think the biggest tip is to build your balance sheet in a way to give you options. And that way you can be agile and go from a year-by-year basis to try to maximize how you withdraw money and minimize that phantom tax burden that's sitting on that balance sheet. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the series. Now let's go get happy. Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab, where we noodle on how to live a happier life. So one thing that has made me happy recently that might help you, well, not recently, but I've been doing this for a while, is it's very easy to get caught in the tide of what we quote unquote should be doing. I struggle with this in business for sure, because there's, this body of knowledge of scaling and growth within the advisory business. It's always about more, and bigger and bigger and bigger. And those are quote unquote the best practices. And I sort of go against a lot of those. But it can make you feel inferior or out of touch because everybody's telling you this is really what you should do. Life is that way too, right? You shouldn't retire. You're supposed to be doing these things. When you retire, you should be doing those things. No, you're supposed to be doing it this way. And I always have to remind myself, hey, I'm playing my own game and I'm organizing my life and setting my own rules. When I remind myself of that, it takes a lot of pressure off and I'm a lot happier because that's the truth. And it's the truth for you too. It's your job to design a life around the things that you value most. And to, if you can't do it all at once, work towards arranging things to serve what you say are important to you, regardless of what other people think or what they say are the best practices. Do that. You're going to create a great life and you're going to have a happy life. Now let's go set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And Roth to set a 7-day goal to take a baby step to live an awesome life. Hey, Nicole's coming back on the show next week. And you know what? Here's your baby step. Just go have an awesome week. That's it. Isn't that enough? I'm going to be honest with you. I am excited about next month's theme. How technology is going to revolutionize your retirement and how we can stay current with all the cool things that are coming that we can use to improve our lives and, well, rock retirement. So I hope you're excited too. Have a great week.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.